I'm your host, Jasper Blake. If you've joined us in the past, you know what you're getting into. If you haven't, if you're new, then just feel free to ask any questions you have. We're going to just wait here a little bit. I see some people trickling in here. This is great. Amber, Kelly, welcome to the Q&A. Thanks for joining us. We're just going to give people a minute or two more here before we get rolling. I think in the past, we've had some people join us from other locations, which is great. It's nice to see participation from other parts of the world. The cool thing about endurance sports is it doesn't really matter where you are in the world. It's all kind of the same, which is good. So let's just give it another minute here, and then we'll get rolling. Okay. So with these question and answer sessions, the best way to communicate with me is to go into the chat function. There's also a raise your hand function, but to be honest, I may not see that as quickly as I'll see the chat function. I have that open and ready to go. Post your question in there, and I'll take them in the order that they appear. Now, in the event that your question does not get answered, please definitely go into the My Endurance Hub community space and put it in the general discussion, and we'll answer it in there after the Q&A. But usually we get to all the questions. We try and contain it to about 45 to 60 minutes. And, I'd encourage you to stay on even if your question's been answered, because often other questions from other people will still be relevant for you. These Q&A sessions are recorded, and they are then available at the My Endurance Hub space after as a recording. So if you miss something, or maybe you have a friend that's also keen to learn some stuff, you can send them over to us, and they'll have the question and answers available in recorded form after. So again, my name is Jasper Blake, and I'm your host. I'm the head coach at the My Endurance Hub space. I've been in triathlon world for, about 30 years now, 20 years as an athlete, as a professional athlete, and now the last 10 years as a coach. I really love it. Still have a real passion for the sport, and it's great to share the knowledge that I've learned over the years, as well as the experiences I've had, and hopefully help you along the way. Okay, so let's jump into the chat here. I see some questions popping up there already, which is great. The first one here is from Amber. Thanks, Amber, for the question. She says, in my training, I often get sore. Does stretching actually help, or is there something else I should be doing? Well, that's a good question. Now, this is going to have multiple answers. I'm not going to be able to give you one definite answer, unfortunately, on stretching. Soreness is when, we exert the muscle in a way that it applies pressure to the muscle. So soreness is fairly normal, especially if you're just getting started. We don't want to be extremely sore. A little bit of soreness, especially if you're doing newer movements, or maybe you did a workout that was right at the limit or even exceeded maybe where your fitness is currently at, you might experience some soreness. Now, it's important, first of all, to define what the difference between good sore and bad sore is. So, bad sore is if you feel like it's an injury, or you've really strained something, or maybe it was a real acute thing where suddenly something really, really hurt. That might be in the injury territory, and I really encourage you to get that checked out with a healthcare professional. But if it's just general soreness from, hey, I'm just starting this journey, and swim, bike, and run is fairly new to me, and gosh, I did a workout and now my body's feeling a little bit sore after. Well, the number one thing that's going to help with that is just recovery in general, sleep and time. Often doing a little bit of movement with the same muscle groups that are sore will actually help. So let's say you're just getting rolling with running, and you do a 30-40 minute run, and you're a little bit sore the next day because of all that impact load. Going for a walk, or even like a little light jog, the next day or the day after, even though it's going to feel a little uncomfortable because you're sore, will often help because you're moving the same muscle groups, and that it's a little counterintuitive, but sometimes that helps. Onto your specific question about stretching. Oh, the world is a little mixed on stretching. And from my own personal experience, I found that there was muscle groups that I could stretch and that made me feel better. I felt really good. As I edge towards my 50th year, I do find a little stretch at night makes me feel good. Does it take away soreness? Well, not necessarily. Soreness will go away with time and with sort of a little bit of active recovery in the same muscle groups. But I wouldn't necessarily say that stretching is going to solve your soreness. And in fact, if you're like a lot of triathletes in particular, where more is better and you're super keen and you stretch too hard, stretching can actually make you more sore. So you have to be careful with stretching. You have to be a little bit gentle. And then you have to understand what type of stretching is actually useful in terms of timing. So, at the beginning of a workout, you may do a warm up and then some dynamic stretching, which is where we move, through different range of motion, and we kind of increase range of motion as part of the warm up. And that's a type of stretching. And then static stretching typically is where maybe what you're thinking mostly of stretching, where you hold a position, for 30 to 60 seconds. And that's the one, if you're too aggressive with that type of stretching, it can actually be counterproductive and it can cause more soreness. But a little bit of that, sure, make you feel a little bit better. I don't think it's going to solve right away the soreness issue. That's more of a time and an active recovery thing. So, should you be doing something else? Well, there's lots of ways to help facilitate recovery. The number one thing I always say is sleep. So make sure your sleep quality is good. Your body does lots of repair when you're sleeping, but of course that active recovery piece. So very low intensity work with similar muscle groups is great. Swimming generally is a really great form of recovery. Even for bike and run or any other sport, it's non-weight bearing. Your body's stretched out, which is often nice. Your body usually likes that. And there's a bit of compression. There's a bit of a cooling factor, provided that the water's not too hot. So there's lots of different things that you can throw into the recovery mix. And stretching certainly is one of them for people, but just don't be too aggressive with it. And you should be good. Hopefully that answered your question. I know it was a bit vague. I'd love to be able to tell you, yes, do exactly these stretches at this time and you will not be sore, but that's not usually the case. So thanks for the question, Amber. Kelly says, I have a stationary bike and treadmill, but I find it hard to get to the pool or lake to swim. Do you have any tips for getting my butt there? Kelly, that's a great question. The first thing I usually tell people if they're really struggling to get motivated and to stick to a schedule is to join a group. So if the swimming pool or aquatic facility you have access to has a master's group or any kind of group, join it, because often we're just so much better at being accountable to other people than we are to ourselves. So that might be step number one is, or on the same thread, find a buddy that you're going to swim with. So you say, look, we're going to meet there at 7 o'clock. We're going to do the same workout. And often that will be helpful as well. When we just have to show up for ourselves, sometimes we're not very good at that, which is kind of sad, but often the case. Whereas if you're meeting someone else, you're meeting a group, like we have often a higher level of accountability, funny enough, to other people. So that would be the first thing I would say is to get there. The other thing I would say is I'm a big believer in the idea of resistance. So think about what's making it hard for you to actually get there. So is it that you wake up and, it's in the morning and now you've got to make a coffee and you got to find your swim gear and, oh, my goggles are lost and I can't find those. Like there's lots of little bits of resistance that if they get in the way, eventually we just sort of throw our hands up and we find a way out of it. But the night before, like set your intent, set some real intent. So pack your swim bag, maybe preload your little coffee maker if you have one. There's lots of things you can do to take out resistance. So if you're going to swim in the morning, you wake up, your swim bag's ready to go. That coffee's on an automatic timer or something, and it's ready to go. And those little habits that you get into, those little bits of things that you can do maybe the night before that take out the resistance are often a big deal. I do that if I want to run in the morning. The one thing I hate is if I have to get up in the morning and other people are sleeping, and now I got to rifle through my drawers and find my, running shorts and a shirt and some socks, and now where are my running shoes? Like, I hate that because it just takes me way too much time and there's too much resistance. But if I just lay that stuff out the night before, I roll out of bed, I throw it on. And once I get that ball rolling, once I kind of get the inertia going in my favor, it's often much easier to get out the door and do that run. And I would suggest that swimming maybe has the same small resistance factors for you. So I would give that a try. Take out the resistance. Great question, though, Kelly. Thank you. And now Kelly has another question here. What are some simple tips I can use to improve my swimming? I'm a beginner, and I think some tips would help me a lot. Swimming is arguably one of the hardest technical sports to learn, especially as an adult. And there's a lot going on there. First and foremost, I would find a good swim instructor or swim coach. So if you're brand new to swimming, get some feedback, get some eyes on your stroke, book a lesson, a private lesson with somebody, join a master's group that has a coach, and start there, because that is going to allow somebody to look at your stroke, give you feedback, and set you on the right path. Now, failing that, let's say you're on your own, there's a couple different ways we can break up swimming. The first is balance. So we want to make sure we're balanced in the water. We want to make sure that our head position and our butt position aren't too far out of whack. So, if this part is my bum and this part is my head, I don't want to be in the water like this, dragging my bum through the water. So I want to aim to get that body position as level as possible. And just simply by getting the head in the right position, so not lifting the head up, but having the water line kind of right across the top of my head, that'll set the balance in the right place. And so just kicking on your front, and using your head to play around with, if I lift my head, my butt might drop, and if I put my head down a bit, my butt usually comes up. A little light kick, like find the balance point that's good. So that's step number one. And then we have to learn how to rotate a little bit and stay in balance. So that's kind of step number two. And then the arm action is a whole other thing. I think you need to figure out whether you're a visual learner or if you need to hear it, like you need to hear somebody describe it, or maybe you need somebody to put your body in the positions they're in. So if you're a visual learner, maybe grab some YouTube clips and have a look at really good swimming, and that might set you on the right track. If you're what we call a kinesthetic learner, so you need somebody to actually put your body in those positions, then definitely you need to get a coach or somebody who's really experienced with swimming who can put your body in those positions, ideally in the pool. Same with the YouTube videos. If you're an auditory learner, so you by hearing it, you figure it out. Those YouTube videos of good swimmers will have some technical feedback, which is good. So you can kind of start there, but it's going to be a bit misleading for me to say, or not misleading, but it's tricky for me to say, do these exact things and you can just swim. Like you have to kind of, getting some technical instruction is just like super, super important. And most of us grow up with some swimming lessons, so you probably have some kind of a baseline you can start with. But getting some technical instruction from somebody in person is just the best way to go initially. Let me think of some other tips to give you here. So I gave you some balance tips. In terms of the arm action, obviously we want, in front crawl or freestyle, we usually call it freestyle. We want that arm to go in front, but not too far in front of our face. We kind of maybe in the 1 o'clock position, we want to extend a little bit. And then when we do the pull, we want to have a nice high elbow. And then we want to have a nice finish down by our hips. Again, you can see it's very difficult for me to sort of explain that on the camera. Best to look up a good video. Maybe I'll post a video in the general discussion of a really nice swim stroke for you to have a look at. Okay. Amber asks, I'm considering running a half marathon in October. How can I build on my sprint triathlon training to shift to a half marathon? Okay, that's a good question, because a lot of endurance athletes are bouncing between sports. So we don't just always do running races or bike races or triathlon. We kind of bounce around a little bit. And so first, what I'll say is triathlon training is really good if you're going to do just bike or just run, because you get a lot of aerobic endurance from doing the other sports. So the work that you've done on the bike and the swim, your heart and lungs are still getting more fitness from that. And so that's going to transfer well to a half. What I would say though, is when you start getting into half marathon territory, usually people are up around, say an hour and a half to 2 hours, or even maybe a little bit more. Your body has to get used to that type of impact. So I would make sure you have enough of a timeline that your body can safely do a run progression. So let's say, your sprint triathlon goal ends, make sure you have, kind of an 8 to 10 week window where now you can focus a little bit more on that half marathon. And that doesn't mean you have to give up any swimming and biking. You can still keep that in. In fact, I would encourage you to do that. But what it means is you can have at least one workout in there that is a little more specific to what you're going to do in the half marathon. And by that, I mean a progressively longer run. So let's say your longest run for the sprint tri might only be like 30, 45 minutes or something like that. And now, 8 weeks later, I have this half marathon goal. Okay, well, maybe I'm going to add 10 to 15 minutes onto that long run each week, for a couple weeks, and then take a little bit of a lighter week, and then build myself up again, so that I can progressively build that running impact load over about an 8 to 10 week period. And that's probably the smartest thing you can do, is just, keep everything else more or less the same. Get a few, run workouts in the week, but make sure that long run is just has enough of a timeline that it can be progressive, which will keep you, on the right side of the injury equation, and happy and healthy as well. So thanks for that question, Amber. Kelly asks, I've always enjoyed lifting weights, and I'm missing that while I train for triathlons. What type of weightlifting can I add that will help with my tri training? So first of all, I'm a fan. I'm an advocate of strength training for endurance athletes. I always have been. Some people are mixed on that one in terms of their opinion, but I think it's really valuable. It's valuable for a number of reasons. Injury prevention is one, strength is another. It's just a good thing to have in the program. The challenge is when people are trying to fit swimming, biking, running, and now another thing into their program, often it's a little bit unrealistic. So the first thing I would ask back to you is, Kelly, is, how much time do you have in your week? If you have all the time in the world, then it's something that you can add in for sure. And the type of strength training you should do, I think first and foremost should focus around injury prevention. So maybe balancing out some of the muscle imbalances that we can get from endurance sports. Like endurance sports, it's a lot of repetitive motion over and over and over again. In swimming, typically, a lot of things you'll see with swimmers, the shoulders roll forward a little bit because we get overdeveloped in the front. So doing some strength training to kind of pull the shoulders back a bit. So in the back is a good idea. Working on some of the main strength components of cycling. So certainly, leg muscles and your glute muscles. Those are all great things to include and focus on. Again, I always recommend that people seek the advice of a professional. So if you do have access to a personal trainer in your town, that's like a really great place to start. Because they're going to have an expertise in that area, and you can say, hey, look, I'm an endurance athlete, and I have the opportunity, or I have the time space to do maybe 2 45 sessions a week. What would you recommend? That's a great place to start. Now, let's say, like most people, you don't have all this extra time. Swim, bike, run is like as much as you can fit in. What I would recommend is a 10 to 15 minute core and hip stability routine that you throw in at the tail end of a run or the tail end of a ride. So it doesn't have to be its own separate session that you need to suddenly create all this life space for. You can just do it, at the end of a run, 10 to 15 minutes. Work on some of the main hip stabilizer muscles. So these are like, hip bridges and maybe clamshell, which, these exercises that work the musculature in and around the hips so that you're really stable in that area. And then, of course, your core, which I would also include along the back. So, some work for some of your posture muscles, Really simple stuff that you don't need any weights for. This is all body weight stuff. You don't need to go invest a whole bunch of stuff or buy a gym membership. You can do this like at home on your living room floor. So having a simple little routine that takes 10 or 15 minutes that focuses on those areas is the best course of action if you don't have the extra space for like a full-on strength training session. Really great question. That's one of the most challenging things I think for people to get in, if they're balancing, other stuff in their life. I just say as well, Kelly, you really enjoy lifting weights. So I wouldn't put that out of your life. I mean, if it's something that brings you joy, it's not going to hurt you, provided that you understand that your goal as an endurance athlete is to, improve your endurance. So you need to maybe have a strength program that is productive for what you're trying to, do in this moment. As opposed to like really hardcore strength training that might be, every single day and trying to build mass or whatever the goal is, in that, for that particular person, it might not be the same. So you might have to adjust that little goal a little bit. But if it brings you joy and it makes you feel good, and it's not going to hurt. So it's good. Kevin says, what's it feel like to complete or win an Ironman? I've seen people finishing on TikTok, and the look on their face shows so much emotion and excitement. Well, I think you just summed up in those two words what it does feel like. Yeah, Kevin, you're absolutely right. Lots of emotion, lots of excitement. I think the neat thing about Ironman in particular is that it really shows people what they're capable of. And the reason there's some emotion behind it is because it's a big ask. It's a big ask emotionally. It's a big ask physically. So you get to the end of that thing, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 hours. That's been a lot of physical exertion. It's been taking a lot of mental fortitude, a lot of grit. And so often when people get to the end, to the finish, there's an emotional release that happens, and people feel good, they feel relieved, they feel satisfied, they feel all the things. And so when you see people breaking down a bit, it's because they've put themselves through a lot, and so that's probably part of the emotional side of it. Maybe relief that it's over. um, and certainly excitement, right? Like you just did a huge thing. And so people get excited that they were able to do that. I really love that part of it. It doesn't matter if you're first across the line or near the back. Everybody's going through similar stuff on the day. And that's very true for even the top professionals. They have moments that don't feel good. It's not easy. They have to really dig and they have to push, and so they too are emotional and excited, and all the things that you feel if you finish an Ironman in 8 hours are kind of the same if you finish in 16 or 17 hours. It's one of the most beautiful things about the sport. We all get to experience similar things, no matter what place we have. So I love that question. It's great. Kelly says, it's the act of going to the pool, getting wet and cold. It's a lot easier to just hop on. Like, oh, Kelly, thanks. So going back to Kelly's question, struggling to get to the pool, what are some things I can do? Kelly, I'm right there with you. Gosh, especially early morning swims. Oh, early morning swim. You're kind of getting out of bed. You're so warm and cozy in your bed. And then you got to get to the pool and it's damp and usually the water's cold. I'm right there with you. One of the most challenging things to do is get going into the pool. I do find it easier to get on the bike or go for a run as well. And the cold was a big part of it. We used to have one pool in particular that we would train at that was always 3 or 4 degrees colder, I think, than every other pool. And it was because it was a competition pool and they had, regulation in terms of what the temperature could be. And they always kept it cooler because if you're competing, you want it to be a bit cooler so you don't overheat. But boy, oh boy, that pool was very difficult to get into in the mornings. So here's what I would say. I found that having a warm drink actually helped. It kind of brought my core temperature up a little bit. So on the way to the pool, I'd have a warm tea or a coffee. That was helpful. And then the unfortunate part is I don't know what to tell you beyond that. At some point, you need to just jump in and know that it only takes a length or two before the body is adjusted and you're good. So you have to just deal with it get it over with, and don't think too far ahead. Like if you're lying in bed wondering whether you should go, and your brain starts going to the part where I've got to jump in and it's going to feel awful, well, you'll probably just stay in bed. So don't do that. Be present. Just say, okay, right now I just got to get up and put my clothes on. That's easy. I can do that. There's no mental anguish to do that. And then maybe I'm having my coffee or my tea, and now I'm driving to the pool and I'm listening to some good music, and I'm just going to focus on those moments. And then the only moment that's like kind of uncomfortable is that one where you got to jump in the pool, but it only lasts like 30-40 seconds. It's nothing. So once you get swimming, usually only takes a length or two, the body's adjusted and you're good to go. So maybe it's, rather than thinking too far ahead and thinking about how awful it's going to be, just stay in the present moment and think, I'm good now. This is good. I'm enjoying my tea. I'm dressed. I'm listening to some good tunes. Focus on that stuff, and maybe that'll make it a bit easier. Kelly says, putting out your clothes the night before seems so simple, but it's also so effective. 100%. Gosh, it's amazing how those little things that we can do to take away resistance to actually getting the thing done are so huge. And for me, even like this many years later, I really want to do that run in the morning. But if I wake up and I have to spend 20 minutes finding stuff because maybe it's down in the laundry, or maybe I can't find my shoes because I didn't put them away properly last night, sometimes that run doesn't happen. It's kind of a sad state of affairs. But if I just lay the stuff out, I roll out of bed, I put my run shorts on, I put my shirt on, I know where my shoes are. Gosh, that run happens like 100% of the time if I do that. So yeah, the simple things are often very, very effective. That applies to all the other sports as well. Sometimes if I knew I had to get up to do an early indoor bike trainer ride, I would set my bike up on the trainer the night before, because I knew if I could just get my butt onto the bike seat and start pedaling, like just that simple act of getting the ball rolling, 2 hours later, I'd have a great workout done. But if I had to spend time in the morning finding my trainer and, oh gosh, my tires aren't pumped up, and now I got to fiddle with this thing and getting on, I hated it. But I would just set up stuff the night before, make a huge, huge difference. Okay. Kevin says, I saw a viral video of a guy laying on his bike and passing other cyclists while going downhill. Is this an actual technique that works and gets used? I think I know the video you're talking about, Kevin, where this person's like basically doing a Superman position and their feet are actually off the pedals and extended out the back. I don't have time to look at the YouTube that you've just shown here, but I think maybe that's the video you're talking about. And if so, the answer is no, please don't ever do that. That is like an incredibly unsafe thing to do. Now, I don't know the level of this cyclist that did this video. It's kind of funny, and hopefully this person, didn't crash. And if they're very experienced, maybe they're even a pro cyclist just goofing around. That's another thing. But that is not a position that you should do going downhill. Your feet aren't on the pedals. You don't really have control of the bike. It's kind of sketchy to be in that position. So highly recommend that you maybe don't do that. However, that video is kind of fun to watch. And my guess is that, yes, that's probably actually a very aerodynamic position to be in. Our body in terms of aerodynamics is usually the biggest factor in terms of like slowing us down. The bike is quite streamlined, but it's our body that creates a lot of resistance. So that position is probably pretty effective, but very, very unsafe. Thanks, Kevin. So no, it's not a technique that really ever gets used. I think that joke was just for a bit of a laugh. But athletes do get very low in the front if they're going downhill, especially if you're watching the Tour de France right now, or any professional cycling race. When the athletes are descending or they're going really fast on flats, they'll try and get that upper body nice and low and in a tight, small position so that they'll move through the air more efficiently. Amber says, these are great questions today, by the way. Thank you, everybody. Oh, Kevin gave me a little laugh. Yeah. I think we're talking about the same video there, Kevin. I think I know which one you're talking about. It went pretty viral because that position was pretty funny. Okay. Let's get back here to Amber says, do you think it's important to lose weight and be as light as possible for a half marathon? Amber, you're treading on careful territory here. I'm always very careful about talking about weight, but here's what I'll say. I think the reason it's important to be careful about talking about weight is that people take it too far. So we think, oh, I need to be lighter for the marathon. Therefore, instead of, maybe a couple pounds lighter, I lose 20 and I get really unhealthy and I get injured. We don't want that. And people often equate weight loss with calorie restriction. And gosh, if you're an endurance athlete, don't calorie restrict. Your body needs the energy. It needs good energy. It needs good proteins and fats and carbohydrates. And you need all the things to do endurance sports well and to recover from them. That said, yes, I mean, look, it would be naive to say that the best runners on planet Earth at the long distances aren't small and probably don't weigh much. When you have to carry your body weight and try and move as quickly as you can, it's better to be lighter. However, don't do that at the expense of your energy demands, your energy needs, and don't do it quickly. Like, don't try and lose 20 pounds in a week. Like, stuff like that is where it gets unhealthy and unproductive. What I would highly recommend is if weight is a concern for you, don't do it alone. Seek out the advice of a nutritionist, of a naturopath, of somebody who operates and is an expert in that space, and get their advice on what you should do. You may be a great body weight in this moment. So you may already be on the right track. But it's a tricky question to answer because I don't want to set people down on an unhealthy path. I want people to understand that they need good calories to perform and recover. But also know that, for running, weight is something that is worth considering. If you want to be more efficient and move more quickly in long distance running, having less weight is often helpful. But again, take that remark very carefully and seek out the advice of someone in the nutrition space that can help you navigate that part of it properly. That would be my advice. And you know what? The other thing I'll say is, you say, is it important to lose weight and be as light as possible? Well, no, that's not the answer. To be as light as possible is, if we take that to the extreme, people get very, very unhealthy. They get very sick. Their body starts to break down. Like, if you just lose weight because you think that's what's going to make you faster, that's not always the case. When I was racing, I had an ideal body weight of about 125 to 130 pounds. I'm 5'5", but I found in that weight range, I performed very, very well. If I drop below 125, I actually got unhealthy. I didn't function as well. I didn't feel like I recovered as well. I didn't have as much energy. I didn't feel as strong. So, losing more because I think I'm going to be lighter wasn't always the answer. I didn't always feel as good if I was, too far in that direction. So got to be careful with that one. It's a good question though. It's a really good question. Kevin says, what's the most embarrassing thing that's happened to you when racing? I'm always so worried I'm going to do something stupid and embarrass myself. Kevin, we're all right there with you. Nothing it puts you in a more vulnerable position than running around in spandex in front of a bunch of people. And you know what? In the old days when we used to race, we did not wear very much. We would wear a Speedo on the bottom, a very small thing on the top. Quite revealing, but here's the thing. What I'll say is that you may think everybody's looking at you. They're not. That can be quite a liberating thing. Most people are so focused on themselves, or if they're spectators, they're focused on, the person they're there to watch. They're not watching you. So take a deep breath and know that, you may think people are looking at you, but they're really not. They're just in their own world. So that's thing one. What's the most embarrassing thing that I've done? Oh, gosh, how long do we have? I don't know. I mean, yeah, I've made some pretty critical errors in racing, like losing my nutrition and dragging my bike through transition and all my bottles popping out and, stuff like that. You know, I if I could go back, it would be nice to do those better. Most of my embarrassing stuff happened off the race course. We're not going to get into that. It's a good question. We all have some stuff maybe we would like to reel back a bit, but also I gotta be honest with you, I like the embarrassing stuff. As long as it doesn't hurt anybody, those are usually the best stories. Like my favorite stories are the ones where I made a bit of an ass of myself, and when I look back, as long as I didn't hurt anybody or really hurt myself, they're funny. So I would encourage you to embrace the embarrassing moments. But I love that question, Kevin. Thank you. Amber says, I'm a busy parent and I run my own business. What's the least amount of training I can get away with and still safely compete a triathlon? I love this question because we get it so much. People want to do a triathlon, but now they got 3 sports to juggle and they're like, how on earth do I do this? I like people to try and follow the rule of 3. Okay. That's great because it's triathlon, which is 3 things. If you can get 3 exposures in each sport each week, you're doing great. Now, the top pros, maybe they're doing a bit of everything every day with an easier day somewhere in there. So they have lots of exposure, but they're at the top. They're trying to improve swim, bike, run on a daily basis. And, they can maximize the amount of training load they can fit in because they can also recover very aggressively. They may not have families, even jobs. This is what they're doing. So they can really push the envelope in terms of what they're physically capable of. But if you're a busy parent, you got your own business, short on time, if you can get up around 8 or 10 hours a week. So think about that. It's about an hour a day with, maybe one day on the weekend or that has sort of a 2-hour bike ride and maybe an hour and a half run. And then a day off, you're kind of getting into that 8 to 10 hour a week thing. But if you can do sort of an hour a day, that would be amazing. On weekends or somewhere in the week, you have a bike ride that can be in the 1 to 2 hour range, a run that can be in the 1 to 1.5 hour range. Not right out of the gate, not if you're brand new, like you got to progress to that. But there you're, with an hour a day and a day off, you're sort of, 4 days a week at 4 hours, or an hour a day, that's 4 hours. On the weekend, maybe a couple hours on one of the days. So now you're at 6, and then, another day where you're an hour to 2, you're at 7 to 8. So that's really good. And if you can get 3 exposures in each sport, that's really good too. The body loves repetition. If you want to try and improve, the body loves to revisit things and keep ingraining those good technical habits and those good, workout kind of exposure. Multiple exposures in the week is like really the way to go if you can. So let me give you a quick example. Often we can get that 4th run in by having a run off the bike. So maybe on the weekend you're doing a longer bike ride and then a run off the bike. And then maybe on the Sunday you're doing a long run. So now there's 2 of the runs out of the way and 1 of the bikes. And then maybe in the week you've got, maybe you're swimming Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you're getting 3 exposures in the water. Maybe that Friday swim's nice and easy, kind of a recovery swim. So that when you're going into the weekend, you have more energy. And then maybe Tuesday, Thursday, you're doing a bike run. And then there you have kind of 3 exposures in each sport. That's a lot of words. Easier shown out, drawn out on a piece of paper or something. 3 of each in each week would be amazing. And anywhere from 8 to 10 hours would also be great. Oh yeah, and to safely complete a triathlon, yeah, that's about what you need. Kelly says, I recently turned 44 and I'm starting to feel some of my sports injuries catching up to me. Is there anything I can do to better manage those as I age? Yeah, as we get older, things start creeping in, especially if we've maybe had some acute injuries from previous sports. Like I know quite a few people, maybe they played hockey or soccer, and maybe they have, they had some knee trauma or something from a sport like that. And now as they get older, it's starting to creep back in. the best thing you can do is have, a health professional on your side that can keep you on the right side of things. So maybe a good physio, a good chiro, whatever is your preference. Somebody that can keep you on the right side of healthy, whether it's with treatment or specific exercises, that will go a long way to helping manage and stave off those injuries. It's also good to have real clear diagnosis of what they are. So if things just hurt and you're just sort of plowing away, but you don't know why, book with somebody and see if you can get to the bottom of it. Because often when we have the answer or we have a clear diagnosis, we have a clear path forward as to what we need to do. Some people just live with discomfort and pain and don't really do anything about it. And then, they may learn that just by switching up their shoe, for example, maybe they're going to solve the problem, or just by including some of these exercises, maybe that'll help manage the problem better. So taking, real steps towards that is a good thing to do. Kevin says, yes, it sounds like the same viral video, the Superman. Yeah. I think we're talking about the same one. Well, if you're interested, if you're in this question and answer, you can go back through the chat session. You'll see a YouTube link that I think Kevin posted. Thank you, Kevin. And if it's the same video, it's quite funny. It's good, but I don't recommend doing that position. Looks like we got one more question here. Kelly says, who inspires you? I've been really enjoying your TikTok videos and you're always full of energy and knowledge. It's really inspiring. Thanks, Kelly. That's so nice to hear. I really, really appreciate you saying that. And if you're on here and you don't know, we have a TikTok channel where I've got lots of stuff going on. It's mostly me talking about stuff, experiences, little tips and all that stuff. And so thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate you saying that. And who inspires me? It's kind of changed over the years. I'm not fickle. I would say that I find inspiration in a lot of different things. It's not any one person. I like every athlete on the full spectrum. So right now I'm watching Wimbledon and I'm really inspired by some of the players because they just have to be so mentally tough. That sport is so mentally tough. The momentum seems to swing back and forth, and they've got 3-set matches, 5-set matches that take 2, 3, 4 hours, and they have to be mentally really tough. And that really inspires me because I think it really forces people to dig. It forces them to manage their emotions, and so I find great inspiration at that. So at a top level, I find amazing inspiration. But I'll tell you what, there's few things that are as inspiring as watching, the last hour of an Ironman, for example, where people are coming in from 16 to 17 hours. And I mean, you get pretty emotional and choked up when you see that, because these people have been out for, 16, 17 hours, and, they maybe don't have all the time in the world to train. Maybe this is a brand new thing for them. Maybe they're just checking something off of a bucket list. Maybe a year ago, they weren't super physically fit and they took on this challenge to make a life change, whatever it is. And now there they are, and they're battling through for hours and hours and hours and hours. And I just find so much inspiration and motivation from that. So I kind of find it everywhere. I just love sport. I love sporting moments. I love when people are digging and trying to get more out of themselves than maybe they thought was possible. And I think if you look, you'll find inspiration in a lot of places if you're open to it. So I love that question. It's a great question. It looks like maybe that's it. This has been great. So many awesome questions today. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who showed up today. Again, if you are looking for a recording of this, maybe there's something you want to review, jump into the My Endurance Hub space and you'll be able to find recorded versions. This one will probably be up in the next hour or so. But you'll be able to find the recorded versions there, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff. We've got daily endurance moments in there, these little daily videos, everything from tips to motivation to, all that kind of stuff. I really encourage you to jump into the My Endurance Hub space and check out all the other stuff we have in there. Amber says, thank you, Kelly. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks so much for showing up and for the great questions. I always love tackling those things. So I think we'll wrap it up there. And Yeah, thanks again for joining us, and same time, same place next week, 10:30 Pacific Standard Time, in the My Endurance Hub space. Okay, everybody, take care and have a great week of training.